right, sophomores, let's start with part 2 of our vocab, and let's go with Code Napoleon, also known as the Napoleonic Code. This is pretty simple. The French Revolution happens, and afterwards it becomes chaos. And at the end of all this, they get rid of their king, they chop off his head, they try to have a society that gives more rights to the average person, but it doesn't quite work. And Napoleon comes in as their new dictator. The Napoleon Code is pretty much the law code that Napoleon put upon France as he tried to build his new empire. That is the Napoleon Code. A balance of power. A balance of power pretty much means that one power does not have more power than the others. So in Europe at this time period, we were looking at a balance of power between a lot of big empires like France, England, Spain, and others. So basically, balance of power means that there is about even powers around each other. They won't really attack each other too much or try to take over each other because they respect the other one. If there becomes a shift in the balance of power, maybe one empire tries to take over more than the other, and this can lead to war potentially. Levée en masse was the mass conscription of French citizens for service in the Revolutionary War. Basically what this means is that it's a French term meaning that soldiers had to fight in the war for France. What war? France has a revolution. There are other empires on its borders who try to take advantage of this and take some land away from France. And the response is that France says everyone needs to fight for the revolution. Everyone needs to fight for France. Again, the revolution, as you'll read about, is basically the third estate, or the people who are the majority of people in France trying to come up and take power in their national convention, and taking power from the first and second estate. But levée en masse means pretty much all people must serve to fight in the French Revolution. I have to add one thing to this. Because this is a time of patriarchy, that meant all men would have to serve. From ages of 18 to 25, had to serve and fight for the revolution. Let's move on to the next word now. All right, so the Congress of Vienna. This happens after the French Revolution, after the Napoleonic Wars, which is when Napoleon comes and tries to take over a whole bunch of Europe and build his own huge empire. After all that, it is a conference to establish European borders and establish a balance of power between the different countries in Europe so they won't fight each other and try to take over each other's lands. It's kind of an agreement to like establish borders and to stop fighting in Europe. Haiti. Haiti is an island in the Caribbean. It's now shared with Dominican Republic. It is the western part of an island back then was called Hispaniola. This is where the French took over this part, and they brought a lot of Africans and slaves to this part of the island. Now, what will really be a big deal is that the Haitians have a revolution. Basically, the mixed race people who are part African, part European, and many of the Africans who've been enslaved will have a revolution and will rise and get their independence from France in this era. La Reforma was a social and political revolution in Mexico under the leadership of Benito Juarez. This was after Mexico was already established as a country. They had won their freedom from Spain. But this revolution was after La Reforma, and this gave more rights to mestizos and to people who were lower on the Las Castas system that we talked about. So mestizos were able to get more power in Mexico, and it also worked to make a new constitution for Mexico that would work on land reform and tried to give more land to the common people of Mexico, especially the mestizos, who had not seen as much before this. Realpolitik is basically the idea that nations try to get practical solutions. They don't try to get ideals. They don't try to live for ideals like democracy and freedom. They're like, well, this is the real world, the way we work, and we need to get solutions. So realpolitik would be like, don't try to get ideals of freedom and liberty. Just try to see what you can get done that's realistic. So it's basically trying to be pragmatic and just trying to get things done that will help people today and now. The Dreyfus Affair is an example of discrimination against Jewish people, or what is called anti-Semitism. In the Dreyfus Affair, there was a French military officer who was falsely convicted of passing military secrets to the Germans. And much of this took place because he was Jewish and the people did not trust him. So it is an example of anti-Semitism. Oh, look who's here. You guys want to say hi? All right, let's see you guys. And we will get to our next word in just a moment.
So our next word is socialism.
Socialism. Socialism is basically a system of government where the means of production, producing things, and is owned by the community as a whole. So in socialism, if there was a factory, the community would own the factory, and they would make sure that wages were distributed to people as they need. So it's not one person owning the factory, it is a community owning the factory. This would be the system of socialism.